really educate you guys and share our experiences with you. And we care a lot about your business as well. So, Joe, let's start this again and talk about email threats.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Yeah, I apologize.
All right.
I started live on Facebook and then I forgot to hit broadcast.
Okay. All right. So, well, again, welcome everyone. Thanks for waiting around for a couple of minutes while we dealt with forgetting to click a button. I want to welcome
punish me later.
I want to welcome you today. This is our second webinar in our cybersecurity webinar series. I think we're going to keep doing these as long as people ask for them. We got great feedback on our last one. Mainly because I think security has become such a huge source of questions from our partner base. So I hope you find this educational, and you know, again, thanks for taking your time to join us. Like a lot of the presentations that I do, pretty much all of them, I like to start off with some statistics. So these are fresh ones. You shouldn't have seen these before unless you were watching on Facebook Live about 30 seconds ago. So first of all, we're looking at just statistically about 300 billion emails sent out per day. So there's a lot of email traffic out there. Over half of those are spam. If you're working with us using one of our email security products, you're not seeing most of those spam messages, but you just see what a massive undertaking that is to keep those things out of your inbox. Last year, in 2019, every single business in the United States, just about every single business faced a phishing attack. And some of those may have not made it into their inbox, but there's so many of them that are sent out that everybody probably got one of them. They're also coming from other locations too. So, you know, in addition to email, you can, these things are coming over social media, starting to see them more and more over SMS. So just, we're going to be focusing on the email piece today, but these came from a recent report from Proofpoint email security, these statistics, and it might be worthwhile to point that out. In 2018, 1 in 6 emails received by each user contained malware. And I think received might be the wrong word, sent to each user that contained malware in 2018. Again, hopefully we didn't see all of those, didn't see most of those if you're using an email security service, but it underscores the importance of having something like that in place. This is a statistic from last year. Since 2013, that's a lot of money to lose from business email compromises. But when you have a number that big, it makes sense why this has become an issue. The biggest thing I think that, and we're going to focus on this today, that a company can do, that I believe a company can do, is training their employees to recognize a phishing attempt. It's not something that we think about enough, and I'm really happy to see all these people on the call today, because this is a good opportunity to understand the threats that are out there today. This isn't totally comprehensive, but it is going to give you a really good introduction, I hope. So, as I said, there's a big knowledge gap. Not a lot of people, not everybody, less than half of US workers know what phishing is. I thought this also came from the Proofpoint report that 30% of US workers think that malware is a type of hardware that boosts Wi-Fi signals. As we discussed last week, malware is malicious software. Another interesting statistic, you know, we hear a lot of, we get a lot of, I think that baby boomers get a lot of, no, they're not getting the benefit of the doubt when it comes to IT, but they're beating out the millennials pretty significantly in understanding what the threats are, you know, the terms that we use when we discuss these things. So understanding what phishing is, understanding what ransomware is by a pretty significant margin, or 20%. Just, I thought that was also an interesting statistic, but there is a huge gap there. There's a lot of people that don't understand this. And by the way, the survey that they did here, these are people working in offices that use email. So it's not just man on the street questions. These are people that interact and should understand what these things are.
I think millennials make up their own words for everything.
Yeah, that could be too. All right, so common types of email threats. We're going to go through a bunch of different kinds of phishing threats here. So what is phishing? First of all, phishing is the act of attempting to manipulate somebody into opening an email, a malicious email, and engaging with it. And there's a lot of different ways to be malicious. There can be harmful attachments. Most common ones that we're seeing are HTML and Word, not so many PDF ones. You'll see PDF threats when there's a new vulnerability in a PDF viewer. Malicious links, very common. And then impersonation of legitimate companies. So that's usually, that's a very common one. And I'll show you some examples of that. If you were on our call last month, you saw the following slide, but I thought it was relevant. This is a email that somebody received. It had an attachment. You may have gotten something like this before. We see these a lot. The attachment in question in this one is it's a Word document, and if you try to open up that document, first of all, there's a password on it that was included in the original email. The reason they put the password on there is that it makes it impossible for your perimeter antivirus to examine the file for malicious intent. So if you're not blocking password protected Word documents, which you can do, then it's going to pass this through. And then again, user has to engage, has to type in the password. Once they type the password, you can see that there's that enable content. They have the macros have been disabled button. If you click that enable content, there's a security warning notification next to that. A macro, it says macros have been disabled. Macros are strings, it's a command string. It's essentially allows Microsoft Word, if you enable that, to launch something on your machine. And so I spent some time doing that animation, which is why I wanted to include this slide again this month. But you enable that content, and the payload that's in that Word document is going to run. And that payload can be any number of things, but it could be a password sniffer, it could be a keylogger, it could be malware, ransomware, any number of things. But all we know is that it's not good. Some messages that I received, I was filtering through the stuff that was caught by our anti-spam email security solution. This is a really common one. And the reason I brought it up is as corny as this looks to me, I get a lot of questions about this specific type of message. It's a message saying, hey, I own your computer. I can see everything on your computer. I can see everything that you did. And I saw you do something that you don't want anyone else to see. And if you bid me $500 worth of Bitcoin, then I'm gonna delete everything. And sometimes you'll actually get these with a password in there as well. And we talked briefly about, actually we talked a little bit about this in the last webinar, that you might have a password in there, and that password might actually be one that you use somewhere. They're pulling those passwords from these big password dumps that are happening on the internet. So like, when LinkedIn was hacked, or any number of sites. I think MyFitnessPal was recently breached. All these breaches that dump passwords and email addresses, they're just matching those up and sending an email and dropping that password in there and saying, hey, look, I've got your password. That adds a little bit of legitimacy to the email in some people's eyes, and that's what can potentially scare them. So my recommendation is, if you get this, is just to delete the message and move on. This is one I got last year. Jordan uploaded it to social media. I thought this was a really convincing one. I found it to be a little challenging. It did have some telltale signs, so I'm going to roll through some of those. So first of all, the email address is coming. The email is coming from me to me, so I know I didn't send this message. However, the display name is noreply@sharepointonline.com. I thought for a moment, well, we have a SharePoint site, and maybe somebody changed the display name to that, but it does just seem weird, and I have no idea why I would have gotten this. So I was a little suspicious. I was pretty suspicious. Now, this part here, I should point this out. This is a really common technique that we see being used in these types of email scams, is changing that display name. Sometimes some email programs don't show the actual email address. It's on the right side. They only show the display name, or people just ignore the actual email address on that right side. The part that's in those caret brackets on the right, that's the actual email address that sent the message. The part that's on the left is what's being displayed, and people will often replace that with an email address of something inside your organization. So they may change that to joe@topdogpc.com, but the email address on the right side might be joe@gmail.com or joe.something@gmail.com. So moving on through the email, when I hovered over this link, saw that it went to a kind of a weird URL, but I was intrigued enough that I opened up a Sandbox browser and visited the site, and lo and behold, I got a Microsoft landing page. Now, again, here it looks very convincing. A couple things to point out. Up here in the address bar, you can see it's got this kind of a strange OneDrive, blah, 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 but it does end with windows.net. And so that's a little convincing at first. Windows.net is owned by Microsoft. That's a legitimate domain owned by Microsoft. So what's happened here is that the scammer's hosting this page on Microsoft Azure's platform. That's Microsoft's cloud computing platform that they sell. And I'm guessing that what they did is they set it up using a compromised credit card number and then just uploaded their site to Microsoft servers. And that Windows.net is Microsoft's default domain for that they assign to their Azure site. So it added a touch of legitimacy to it just because of the Windows.net, but quickly figured out what was going on. And then the last piece here is just forgotten my password is not the text that's typically on there. And I think that the people that are doing this tend to not be native English speakers, and you'll see this type of thing a lot, but they're getting to be much better at it. So that's not it's not 100% like if it looks beautiful, it's good. It's a combination of things that you should be looking for. So I did not supply any password information there. Here's one that I got yesterday. This is a message that looks like it's coming from American Express. It's letting me know that my account's being locked out, and they sent me a handy little HTML file that I could open up and take a look at, or open up and run, and it's going to take me to American Express. I took a look at that HTML file. It had a JavaScript payload in it that I didn't actually examine exactly what it was going to do, but I'm sure it wasn't anything I wanted it to. So it certainly wasn't going to take me to the American Express website. I know that. So let's move on here to a little bit more kind of breaking down the other types of phishing. So spearfishing is, this is one that, the previous ones we looked at are more of, they call them spray and pray, where they're just blasting a bunch of different people with the same type of message and hoping that somebody is going to click on it. It's kind of a shotgun approach. These spearfishing targets, they target a specific individual. So what they're doing is they're trying to figure out what kind of data they're after. They're going to try to figure out who has access to that data and specifically target those people. That's the spearfishing approach. And for instance, they'll use sites like LinkedIn to try to find out, they'll do research on their targets. So they'll find out who they communicate with. And typically what they'll do is try to send an email. They'll send an email from somebody that it looks like they're close with, maybe on LinkedIn, so that they look less suspicious. They'll spoof the email so somebody looking at our site might say, hey, Joe works with Jordan. I'm going to send him an email that looks like it's coming from Jordan. And he's going to maybe look at that with a little bit more legitimacy than if I send it from some random account. And I'm going to call him Joe Malmberg in there. And I'm going to maybe have his, maybe I'll find something that has his Jordan signature on it, and I'll copy paste that in there. So getting really targeted on it.
Yeah, you can tell, Joe, too, that nowadays more and more this is the type of attack that's gaining in popularity. They're focusing a lot more on quality over quantity, like you said.
Yeah, there's a lot. I think that there's a lot more potential financial gain in these, and we'll go over some of that in a minute here. But here's an example of one. Now, this one doesn't have the whole signature intact, but I have witnessed that at some of our partners where they've received messages from the outside that appear to be coming from someone on the inside, and they have their entire signature and everything else on it. So yeah, are you in the office today? This is a really common way for these things to start out. And in this case, there's no payload. What they're trying to do here is, instead of infecting your machine and doing ransomware or trying to get your credentials for some other reason, they're actually trying to get you to send them money. Here's another one, just really common. I wanted to point out, this is what I was mentioning earlier. This is the display name versus the actual email address. So this is from I think this is University of Kentucky, or Eastern Kentucky University website. But this is a very good example of, the from address on the left side there. They actually made the whole eku.edu, which is their domain, be part of the first part. So somebody quickly glancing over that might not notice that.
And Joe, we have just a quick question along these lines. Someone wondering how are these all messages that were caught by spam or email security, or did they get through?
Well, sometimes they do. I mean, the ones I mentioned earlier, the spray and pray ones that get blasted out to a bunch of people, those are going to more commonly get caught by an email security system. But the ones that are much more specific, they're so innocuous because if we go back and look at now, this one doesn't have the to and from in here, but this one isn't faking anything out. This is probably the email address that it came from. And there's nothing in the body of the email that says that looks too strange. Now I can't speak to what we work with Barracuda, what kind of tuning they're doing there that might catch something like this. But from my perspective, from a standard anti-spam, anti-malware, there isn't anything malicious about the content of this message at this point. So yeah, it might get caught, but this is really where you can't rely on the tech. You got to rely on the person. So this is a really common one. We've had some people fall for this, and it's usually coming from I think in every case it's been somebody new to the company that's fallen for it, unfortunately. But they're just trying to help out and be quick with doing something for their boss. And they're asking them to buy gift cards from the store, and they want to reward some of their good employees with it, and they want to keep it confidential. So they're doing all these things, and like, this is great. And they'll often say, I'm really busy, so don't call me, email me here. And this one actually looks like it came from a text. But yeah, we had this happen to a couple people, and I know in one case they went out and bought the gift cards, but they stopped short of giving the person the codes over email because they thought it was a little strange. So moving on, kind of getting even a little bit more narrowed down from the spear phishing is the CEO fraud and CEO scam. So there's two parts to this. One is the spear phishing of a CEO's credentials. The other part is once they have that, or maybe they don't have it, if they have their address, they can send emails to the employees to try to exploit their trust, or they can try to spoof the CEO's identity to exploit their trust. So again, it's usually requesting wiring of funds or sharing of some kind of confidential information. So let's take a look. This is again from Eastern Kentucky University. I just thought this was a really good example. They had look at the from address. From address is not, so the Eastern Kentucky University's URL is eku.edu. It's not marietta.edu. So there's a big red flag right there. The subject line says Kentucky Christian University rather than Eastern Kentucky University. But on the bottom there, they have you see that the name that it's from, it's Michael Benson, but it's up top, the from is Hyatt Wolf. And then of course there's a PDF document that probably has some kind of a payload in it that is gonna make the person send their credentials out or get their machine handled with ransomware or something like that. Here's a really interesting series of emails, and this is an actual series of emails that occurred a few years ago. from a person pretending to be John here is Susan's boss, and he's asking her to send money. So this is how it starts. I need you to send an international payment. Let me know when to send the bank details. And she says, sorry, Susan wants to help. I'm going to help you out. He says, I want you to do this right now. I was very busy earlier. She says, okay, I can do it for you now if that will help. He says, yes, I've been very busy. So here's the amount. And it's the end of the day. Look at it, it's 5:48 p.m. And actually, let's roll back here, because this happened early in the morning, and then he sent this thing late at night. He says, yeah, I need you to do it today. And she got, I guess maybe she did it up in the morning. I can't see it to authorize under international. And he says, find a way around it. Can I send you the bank details? And she says, oh, I have to leave. Got to go home tonight. All right. So he sends her the information, and let me send me a payment slip once it's completed. And here's some more information about it. And that's where the chain ends, but it's not where the actions end, because Susan actually sent that money out. So the lesson out here, of course, is, we can blame Susan, but it's also don't prepare Susan for failure. Her company didn't prepare her for this kind of a situation. They didn't train her. So it's really important to have your staff understand these threats. And I think I described it last time. I've heard it described in these terms that, every single one of us as human beings is working in an office. We're ultimately here trying to help other people. And so sometimes we might be a little too friendly in these emails and not put on our skeptical hat. And the thing that we can do when we train and on these types of things is that we can turn every single employee who's a potential threat vector into a security sensor. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to do, because we can throw all the technology that we want at security, but ultimately it's really up to us as human beings what we're going to do, what actions we're going to perform. And we need to have the right, if we don't have the information or the knowledge to make the right decisions, all the technology in the world isn't going to help us. So what types of things oh,
Great
sorry,
point.
you have a question?
Yeah, quick. Well, one comment for actually one thing that I, along those lines, I like to also bring up the idea of like the sender, so getting better at us being senders of email to make that, if you're a CEO that's sending out like a one-liner to your finance person to send money, if that's like common for you to do, then you set them up to not be as suspicious about it. But if you make a habit of emails being a certain way, maybe making sure that there's personal things said, like, hey, where, like, just getting better at sending emails so they're not so bland. Sometimes people send you an email and it's just a link, and it's like, if that's a legitimate email, like you're setting me up to be trained that you would actually do that, rather than saying a little line like, hey Jordan, here's a link that I thought you would like. This is about what we talked about yesterday. When you make it a little more personal, you can have their antennas be up if that's the process. One question here from the attendees here along this line: is it okay to respond to the malicious email if there's no attachments or links? You replied to them, but you didn't click on anything, you didn't send anything, if you didn't send the money, what sort of risk do you have by just replying to the malicious email?
Well, at that point they know that they've potentially got somebody, so they're gonna focus their efforts on you. And they may focus their efforts on your company a little bit more. So obviously you don't want to engage them, but like from a technical perspective, no, they're not going to leap into your computer and be able to do anything just because you replied to them. But they're going to be.
But you're right. Sometimes people like want to have fun with it. They want to get involved. They realize it's a fraud, and they're like, hey, I'm going to mess with this guy. Part of me thinks, don't even do that. Like, don't let me know that you.
You think that they're. Let them think it was totally unsuccessful. That'd be the best thing to do. And I didn't really talk about. I've brought this up before, but you know, there are a lot of things, non-technical solutions beyond training that can solve a lot of the whole CEO fraud thing, and that's just having policies in place for how you prevent how you send money. You know, we don't send money over via an email confirmation. We do an email and a phone call, and we sign something off. You know, you try to subvert the technology. You know, I may have brought this example up last month, but there was a story in it was in the UK where a CFO sent a over £1 million payment somewhere based on a phone call he received from his German CEO, and the call from his CEO was actually generated by a computer. It wasn't a real person on the other end of the line. So we may be entering that territory soon, where we can't just follow up with a simple phone call. You have to do something else. So the costs of successful phishing, loss of data, really common. Data is going to come through credential compromise. Ransomware also straight up there too, and other types of malware. And then the financial fraud. You know, it's all about money at the end of the day, and the paydays for the successful CEO fraud are pretty big, and so are the ransomware ones too that we went over last month. Credentials, depending on who it is, credentials can sell for, you know, between $1 or $2 piece, $1 or $2 a piece on dark web. But maybe if you have someone that's a little bit higher up, they're going to sell for a bit more. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the end user security training, just because we talked about it this month and last month. I'm going to just show you some examples. End user security training that we do is it's two-pronged. One is actual training sessions, so kind of like what we're doing right now, but much shorter, well produced and targeted to a specific topic. And I'll show you some examples of those in a little bit here. The other piece of this is that there's some ongoing phishing training. So we're actually actively phishing our own employees. We're sending malicious looking emails to our own employees, and since they're coming from us, there's actually nothing malicious about them, but we have had them go through that training first, and now we're sending them tests. We're testing them. And we want to see, hey, are they clicking through on these messages? And if they are clicking through on these messages, then we can enter them into some additional training. So let's take a look here. Here's an example. This is one that I sent to Jordan through the system last month, or a few months ago. Looks very convincing, right? This is a Netflix password reset. If they click on that message, now we can actually choose what the landing page looks like when they click on that. So we can make it look like they get to a Netflix landing page, or we can say, hey, you shouldn't have clicked on that. You're going to have to take some more training. I'm going to breeze through these just because I think these are all some pretty convincing ones. There are many less convincing ones. The great thing about this product, this service offering, is that these templates change a lot, and there are tons of them to choose from. You know, LinkedIn, very common. Of course, HBO now. There's a lot of Disney Plus ones that are coming around as well. Oh, you know, it looks like I have a slide here that I meant to put on the CEO part here. Here's another one of those CEO ones. Here's another example. The CEO. Oh no, you know what? This one actually. Yeah, this is one of those. This is one. Sorry. Yeah, my mistake. So this is actually This is not a. This is an example of CEO fraud coming from the phishing system. Here's free pizza. Hey, we noticed someone's using your email to conduct illegal activity. So very similar. These are the types of things that your staff will see. And one other kind of neat feature of this is that it actually adds a little button up here. If you see what we have circled in red there on the right, there's a report phishing button. So if you get something like that, you can click on it, and if the message was indeed sent by the system, they're going to get kudos from that, saying, hey, yep, good job, you caught a message that we sent to our phishing system. But the other thing that this does, and this is a little evil, honestly, it also takes that email and submits it to the email security training system. And the end user security training system, and we can take that, if it's a really convincing one, we can take that and turn it into a template and send it out to more people. I want to show you, I'm going to switch what I'm sharing here in just a moment. I've got, I want to show you some of the content on the system here. I'll go to.
Hey, Joe, what do you think about when you implement a practice like this, a security awareness training and a phishing simulation, and you open it up for them to report phishing emails?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think there's a risk that, I mean, they end up kind of inundating your IT group with, you know, just a ton, I mean, analyzing all these different potential phishing attacks?
I think that it's that the alternative is worse than the alternative of somebody following through and clicking on these or engaging in them is more dangerous than the potential for IT staff to be overwhelmed by them. You know, and I guess it gets back to the, you know, we should be rewarding our employees and encouraging our employees, our staff, our coworkers to look for these types of things. If we are discouraging the submission of these things, then we're really not going to start being able. We're not going to be able to contain this threat. So here I'm gonna bring up the InfoSec IQ information here. So this is an example. There is a ton of content on here, and we can actually break it down by industry. So you know, let's just say you're in healthcare, and we have some specific needs there. Here, I'm gonna get logged back in here. I'm just gonna stop the share here and get this up just a moment.
Yeah, I do think it was interesting in one of these recent studies by Proofpoint. They had, in at least the subset that they were polling, they reported like a 86% success rate in approaching their program with more punishment rather than incentives, which I found very interesting because I don't agree with it. You know, their punishments in that poll kind of varied, though. Some of them were just, they had to sit down with more training, more coaching.
Well,
all the way down
to
sorry, all the way down to fines and terminations, which I just think it builds a, you know, if you build a fear into them that they're going to get punished for reporting these things, it just seems like it would be counterproductive. But it is,
yeah, you know, I think that could potentially just be a source of what the culture is in the company to begin with as well. So yeah, I don't know. I certainly agree with you on that. So anyway, I've got this screen up here. So here's an example of healthcare ones. So there's a ton of data on it. There's a ton of resources available for you know, specific industries. And these are the training modules. So yeah, if you are a HIPAA covered entity, there's HIPAA content on there. There's just much more generic ones, you know, acceptable use policy, advanced persistent threats. You know, am I hacked? That's a really great question that we hear from people. So anyway, going through those, there are a lot of different options there. I'm going to bring up something else here. So like I mentioned, you can here we go. You can report on what people have done. So this wasn't a real, we had bots go through this and click on these. So this is just some demo information, but this shows us what happened when people receive these messages, who clicked on them. We can actually break down to the individual person who's doing it. By the way, repeat offenders, it's pretty common. You see the one person who clicks on, the person who clicks on one thing is typically the person who clicks on everything. And so that's why it's really important to get those people trained. And we can this is not an awesome report because this is just robot data, but thought was worth looking at. I'm going to bring up the.
And then Joe, we have a few questions kind of queued up. Just let me know. I want to make sure you finish your thoughts here, but I'll let me know when a good time to ask them is.
Okay. I'm ready for you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, so first of all, we have a question. Someone was asking where the phishing button came from. I think he missed that.
Yeah, the phishing report phishing that comes from the emails, the end user security training, end user information security training product, InfoSec IQ that we were just looking at. It's a module that's an optional piece that you can turn on, and you know, I think that you know, when you do this, you let your staff know, hey, you're going to have to take some training. One of the things I didn't mention about the system that I think is really great is that when we set it up, there are a couple steps. Well, there's a number of steps for the setup, but it's really automated once we're done, because we set up your company, and then we set it so that, all right, if there's a new email address found, so we're assuming it's a new employee, we're going to make them go through this training that we make all of our employees go through. And then we can have, you know, every year we're going to make them do some additional training, and we can set it so that they're going to, once they go through that training, they're going to start getting those test emails delivered to them. And if they click on them, then it's automatically going to move them into this type of training, this type of training, this type of training. And we have, and it's, the reporting on it is pretty in depth, so we can see intelligently, you know, here, all right, here's somebody that is going to need some extra help. Sorry, that was a long answer for where did the button come from.
There's another, this one's a quick one. What is your take on unsubscribing to emails?
You know, I often, so yeah, my take on unsubscribing is I only unsubscribe from things that I know are from like legitimate companies. You know, the ones that say reply to this email, you know, I get a lot of emails from people trying to sell us mailing lists and that type of thing. And they say, please reply, unsubscribe if you don't want to receive these anymore. I just block them at that point, or I just ignore them. But yeah, if I get something from like Dell or Target and I'm like, yeah, you know, I don't want to get any more emails from Dell or Target, I feel perfectly fine clicking on that unsubscribe link after hovering over it to make sure that it actually goes to a legitimate site.
Right. That's okay. This is a good one. So if we were to click on these phishing links and submit sensitive data, what are the next steps that we should follow to contain or minimize the breach of security?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that can happen at that point. First of all, is you should, I would, whatever machine it was that you did that on, depending on what happened. So if you clicked on, if it was a malicious attachment, you probably want to take that machine offline immediately. And then you are going to, I would probably contact your IT support team. Just depending on your environment, the next steps are going to be a little different for every company. You know, typically taking a machine offline, changing credentials, you know, checking your email system to see if any new rules have been created on your mailbox.
That's a big one.
Yeah, there are a lot of different steps involved, but it all depends on who's hosting your email, where your server is, you know, what machine you did it from. Were you on a personal machine, an office machine? Were you at the office? Were you at home? All those things really depend on what the answer to that question is.
Yeah, and I would add too, like that is a great question to sit down with your leadership team, bring in your IT as well, or your security consultants, and ask those questions, and put a list together. I think one of the best things you can do is not have to you know, fidget around when all of a sudden a breach occurred and try to figure out what steps to do at that moment. It's good to have a list, a prepared list, step by step, what systems you need to check and what you need to do and who you need to notify, so that you can just go through the checklist.
You got any more questions? Others, I can move on to the next slide here. I have some time for Q&A at the end.
Yeah, why don't you move through?
Okay.
There's a few more, but
Okay.
we can save them
All right. So again, mitigation, very similar to a lot of the things I mentioned last month. If you don't have it already, have an email security solution. If you're working with us, you most likely have an email security solution. Just about, I think every single customer we work with on a monthly basis has that set up ahead of their email. End user information security training. I think that everybody should do it. Everyone should have their employees trained on this stuff. Whether it means that they're finding webinars like this or doing something much more in depth like you have through an information security training program. I think the program is great because you can prove that you've done it and you can see who's been trained, who's strong, who needs some extra help. I love the password manager. Have a password manager. You create allows you to create unique passwords for all of your different websites. A couple that I think people asked before. We have one that a corporate one that we can provide to our partners. That's through our MyGlue platform. If you have something just individual that you want to use on your own, one I really like is RoboForm. I think there's Passportal, there's LastPass, there's a ton of them out there. Removing old accounts is super important. Do that at least 4 times a year. Just review your user list and delete the users that you are no longer working in your system. Maybe there's some old service accounts that are no longer being logged into. We can run a report on your network that shows active and inactive accounts and the last time they're logged into, last time password is changed, that type of thing. Reviewing your firewall settings. Again, these last couple aren't necessarily specific to email threats, but the firewall settings are important because if somebody gets your credentials and you are allowing people into your network, it's a great way for them to be able to get into your network now that you've provided them with your credentials through a phishing email. Backups are super important. The most boring things in IT, but they're super important. They're boring until you need them. And then understanding your RTO, RPO. I think I mentioned this last month. It's your recovery time objective, recovery point objective. Recovery time objective is how long can we afford to be down. Recovery point is how far back can we afford to go. What is the most amount of data that we can afford to lose? Is it 1 hour? Is it 1 day? Is it 1 week? Again, mentioned the next gen AV, the endpoint detection response. It's a little bit more of a whitelisting application rather than a pure antivirus. There is the product that we like and endorse is pretty powerful. There hasn't been a ransomware infection with anybody that's had it installed. Network segregation. Again, we all have flat networks when we set up certainly it's the way that things are being done when I started Top Dog PC. Now let's move our assets into different parts of the network. So let's segregate our corporate machines from the machines that people bring in from home, from the mobile devices they bring into the office, from guests that bring their devices in the office, and maybe if we have some production machines, maybe those even get segregated elsewhere. You don't want to have somebody be able to plug in a computer on your network they brought from home that doesn't have the antivirus that you've put on every single machine in your office and go on out and start trying to attack every single device in your office, because that can and does happen. Review your cyber insurance policy and get one if you don't have one. Again, these are all the same ones from last month. Dark web monitoring is really helpful. We didn't really talk about that too in depth today, but that is a service that actually looks for if your username, password, if your email address has any passwords or personally identifiable information associated with it that's been dumped onto the dark web. This dark web monitoring service will alert you to when that happens. And web filtering. So even if you have a lot of these malicious links, if we've got good web filtering in place using a subscription on your firewall or on a web filtering application that runs on the local machine, so for when users aren't in your office, a lot of that is potentially a technical solution to if somebody clicks on one of these malicious links, it'll stop them from getting through. I'm just going to point out that we have a couple information security packages that we're offering that bring a lot of these solutions together. You know, I think that everything in my mind and Jordan's mind, everything starts with an assessment, because we always get the question, what's the one thing, what's the best thing that I can do? And it's an impossible question to answer what the best thing is for any individual company to do, because until we identify what the gaps are, we aren't going to be able to make a good recommendation of where the best place to spend your security dollar is. So we're bundling that with the Essentials plan, where you get a network assessment, dark web monitoring, the training that we went over today, and then the enterprise password management. And then if you move up to the next one, that enterprise endpoint detection response, backing up your email, your cloud email. Again, backups don't sound that fun. They're pretty boring until you need them. It's really important to have good backups of your data. And then the managed multi-factor authentication. So there's third-party multi-factor authentication applications. We use one called Duo that we mix into that Pro package. And then there's some additional on-site network security monitoring that is ongoing daily internally on your network to make sure that everything is up to date. And then I'll just point out again, you know, Jordan led off with that he's the CEO of High Tech Secure. That's the security arm that we started up a new company for. And this is actually, you know, the full information security assessment. This is using Jordan when he puts his CISSP hat on. Building, you know, disaster recovery plans. This is really more the policy piece of your organization, but you know, also looking at some of the more advanced security services like firewall management and security operation center services. We've partnered with a U.S.-based security operations center that does live monitoring of your internal and external network. So that is the final slide, but I want to invite everybody to our next webinar. This is a question that we get all the time. How do I know I've been hacked? It's a really tough question to answer, but we're gonna try to answer this for you with some specific. Yeah, we're gonna tackle it with some specific situations and stories, and I think it's gonna be pretty interesting. So. Again, thanks for coming. Jordan, we have any more questions that you want to?
Yeah, we've got a couple people patiently waiting.
Okay. All right.
and do them quick.
Okay.
Well, I'd also point out on this slide, though, that we did confirm that April's is going to be about cyber liability insurance, right?
It sounds like that may be what we're going to be talking about. We may have a couple guest panelists on that webinar talking about cyber liability insurance.
Yeah, we'll keep you guys.
I think they call it cyber liability. They call it cyber insurance. All I know is if it has the word cyber in it, there could be a number of different types of insurance. I'm
and it's a very confusing topic to many people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why we're bringing somebody else in to talk on that one.
All right. Okay. So a couple of patient questions. One is, how long would implementation of InfoSec take? Does the reporting in InfoSec cover who has completed the training so we can send out targeted reminders?
Well, as you've been the one who's done most of the implementation, you're probably best suited to answer the length of time it takes to do that.
Yeah, it's very quick to implement. It takes time to build it, though, like to perfect it. So I mean, you could in a matter of an hour get set up, get your users added, and start and send out a training campaign. But you know, to really tackle it as like a program, how you want to do this on a regular basis, what is your approach going to be? What are your incentives going to be, or punishments? That that takes time to just get comfortable with it and get your users doing it. And yes, you can see who completed the training, and you can send out reminders.
Yeah, the system automatically sends out reminders if you don't, if you haven't done your training. It bugs you and bugs you and bugs you, and then you can see that from the portal. And I think that you can have those emails can come to the person who set everything up.
Yeah, and like I was alluding to, a lot of this stuff, if like you can implement it quick, you could turn on multi-factor authentication, you can do all these things, but my recommendation would be to take a breath and have a strategic planned approach. I mean, just sending people a link to training doesn't really, if you're not knowing how you're going to approach it, is going to be, I mean, I had one multi-factor authentication piece where it's like, okay, you turned it on, but then if no one's monitoring it or no one's if you're not revisiting these things on a regular basis and following what your actual information security strategy is, then some of the stuff can fall apart. The information security is something you gotta keep working on. It's not a one and done thing. So
I think I just point out that specifically with the end user security training, it's something that it's something that IT is going to engage with HR on, because it's so much part of your employee onboarding plan and for the rest of so that it's we can set up the platform, but we are going to want to work hand in hand with whoever's managing HR to make sure that we're covering all of your best practices when hiring and training. And, like I pointed out in the HIPAA piece, there's some training there that you need to have people do every year. So just making sure that's conforming to your organization's operations.
And then you're actually thinking about it in terms of role too, and you're training them specific to their role, which is going to be a lot more effective than just generic training for everyone, All right, I think this is the final question. How do we talk the owner into buying security training?
It's funny because I'm very appreciative of the people that are on the calls that are coming and checking these out, because obviously there's interest. The most effective way is to fish the owner. I'm not kidding that this insecurity that I am kidding, but insecurity, it is probably the greatest motivating factor when something bad does slip through, that people decide that, all right, it is time to act on it. Because who wants to spend money? Nobody wants to spend money, but if you can show that this is going to make a difference, and specifically, if you're somebody who is in a maybe like, for example, if you're a HIPAA covered entity, a lot of the stuff that this product does, you're probably doing somewhere else and maybe paying somewhere else to get that taken care of. So there could be some cost savings there. But yeah, really, it's a matter of selling the importance. You can send them some headlines of what has happened to all these municipalities over the course of the last 6 months that got hit with ransomware. There was a power company, I think, that got hit with ransomware last week for 2 days, and all their computers were down. So all of these things are gateways to bigger problems. And you wouldn't sell you wouldn't set up a network without a firewall. This is kind of like putting that same analysis that a firewall, unified threat management, performs on data. It's kind of putting a firewall on every single employee that you have.
Yeah, and Beth, the answer is no. I'm not even going to read what you asked, but the answer is no. No. The other thing I might add is that I think when you're trying to convince whoever is holding the purse strings to invest in some of this stuff, a couple things come to my mind too is just try. Sometimes you can't. If you help them understand that information security can be a competitive advantage for your business, that people nowadays, this is so transparent to everyone that people want to do business with companies that have proper information security hygiene, and you can stand out when you're doing these things. That can be beneficial. Also, when they start to understand what some of the stuff that we shared, that these attacks are more people-centric. You have to invest in your people, and not just the next blinky, shiny technology thing. You have to invest in the people that you have. They're your most important assets. They're your last line of defense. Like Joe preaches, they can be your best, probes and finding these things. But invest in them. They're the ones being attacked, and they're being attacked very strategically. So give them the tools and the weapons to fight it. Let's see. Got a couple. No, Beth, stop asking those questions.
I'm not seeing these questions, so I'll look at them later.
Let's see. We got. How do we get started with investigating whether this is something we want to move forward with?
Yeah, give us a call. We'll you know, if you want a little bit more in-depth information on what the products entail, you know, we can go over that. The dashboard and everything are. It's not the most exciting thing in the world to look at, but I think the content is probably is going to be one of the more interesting driving factors. And then I guess that I shouldn't say that the platform is pretty neat. I mean, we can see down to the detail who clicked on what, who's received what, who's looked at what email. So yeah, get in touch with us. We can give you some more information.
And that answers, you know, Beth, your other question. So we can come in person and talk if there is someone in your organization that needs to be you know, convinced that this is an issue and that this is a direction to go. We can certainly come on site and talk with them. But that's also why we're making these webinars, is to make sure that this information is out there. You can share it with those that need to understand the threats and what steps can be taken to protect yourself against them. So for sure, share these out, and yeah, if we need to come in and talk to them, we can.
All right, thanks so much. We hit the top of the hour here, and yeah, thanks for sticking through this for the last hour. I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us.